The man himself. Look at this, standing ovation already. You haven't even said anything. Wow, look at this.
This is amazing. I actually thought you'd all have gone home by now. Wow, that's great.
Walter, how does it feel to get a standing ovation before you even say a word?
You know, the problem with that is now their expectations are so high I could never meet them.
It's all downhill from here, right?
Yeah, yeah.
No, it won't be downhill. We'll have some fun. Thank you so much for joining us. Have you ever been to Minnesota before?
I believe I have, right? Yeah, I believe I have, yeah. And it wasn't never this cold.
I was just about to ask, do you like the cold weather or do you prefer the warm weather?
Oh, do I? No, I don't like the cold weather. But then I don't like the hot weather either. So, you know, first of all, I'm at that age where I'm finicky about everything, you know? Yeah, get grumpy about cold weather and hot weather and all that stuff. So you have to bear with me. I'll try to keep the conversation bright and cheerful, and I won't complain about my bones, okay?
I mean, I'd be interested in hearing it. Do you want to go ahead and jump in straight into the Q&A?
Sure.
I know we got a lot of great questions, so lucky number one right there. Go ahead and ask the question.
As well as being a fan of Chekhov in the original series, I was also a fan of Anton Yelchin in the reboot. And I was wondering if you ever got a chance to meet with him on a personal level before he passed, and if he collaborated with you or talked with you before he did the movie.
I did get to meet with him. What happened was J.J. Abrams called me up while they were shooting the first film and said, would you like to come down and visit? And I said, sure, that'd be great fun. And he said, Anton will be here. I said, oh, all the better. I'd love to meet with the young man. You know, it's easy and it's almost reflexive that when somebody passes, we have only good things to say about them.
Right.
And I mean, after Richard Nixon died, I couldn't believe the good things that I heard about him. Didn't know that was another universe, you know. But Anton, bless his heart, was such a delightful, such a charming young man, so bright and so talented that it doesn't require any fabrication on my part to speak positively. We spoke for about 2 hours, and I came away richer for the experience. He was delightful, felt young man. I saw him once after that at the premiere of the film, and afterwards, everybody, we were all, they had taken over a big parking lot and they had the party outside. And all of the actors from the new film had their collection of fans, as did he. Everybody was standing around, the media and journalists, and he spotted me. He looked past the crowd and saw me walking by. He said, Walter, I have my own Chekhov action figure. This is an actor who did 67 roles on television and motion pictures, who played the title character, who played opposite Sir Anthony Hopkins in a film, and he was excited about his Chekhov figure. I thought that was very, very charming. Lovely young man.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hello.
Hi.
It's great to see you. Big fan. I was wondering, since Star Trek came out before, like, the glory age of CGI, if you can call it that, and there were a lot of practical effects, I was wondering, as an actor myself, what was the toughest thing to, like, imagine when you didn't see it right next to you?
Well, you know, first of all, an actor's job is to pretend. Yeah. And we can call it whatever we want. We can give it, you know, terms that make it sound more aesthetic, more artistic. But ultimately, you're pretending. So it really is not a big deal to look out at a soundstage and see some guy scratching his groin and saying, "Captain, I don't know what that is," you know. Yeah,
Thank you very much.
yeah.
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm a fan, and I grew in my with the original Star Trek series and understanding more of the social impact. So, did you see any social impact to the show when you did it, and what would it be from your perspective?
Well, I don't know. I don't know how that would manifest itself. You know, I didn't have people come up to me and embrace me and say, "You're my brother, even though you're from the Soviet Union." And you know, I never had that experience. I think there is a subliminal. The message is more subliminal than it is, documented by the stories themselves. And the message is, look at all these people of different races and creeds and nationalities and ethnicities, and look how well they get along. And they're living in the future at a time when hopefully we will be able to achieve that. And I think that's the most striking, most important message. Of course, the storytelling was in many cases helped promote that idea. Not all the stories did, but a lot of them did. And that sense is what I take away from Star Trek. The thing that I've said this before. If I had to be not saddled is certainly not the right word, but if I had to be identified as something, one particular character in one particular series, it couldn't have been better than being in Star Trek, because I believed in the philosophy and the principles of that show. Now, for those of you who I'm going to piss off with my next couple of moments, I apologize, and I know you didn't pay to hear me talk political issues, but in this particular day, on this particular day, in this particular time, more than ever, we need a world where people can get along, where people can live together and respect each other and have loyalty towards each other.
Thank you.
Well, I guess I didn't piss off too many people.
Thank you for saying that. So my question to you is, although you're very well known for your acting roles, did you ever have an opportunity to help out with writing the scripts or directing the episodes, or any behind-the-scenes work?
No. I wrote one of the animated shows, and that was it was fun, and it was very frustrating. I didn't know at the time. When you're talking to somebody and they seem quiet, and you think, "Oh, they don't like me. They're aloof. They don't want to talk to me." So that's the interpretation I generally go with. So when they asked me to write one draft after another, I assumed that I was just not qualified to write this, and I had no idea that that's what Gene expected of all of his writers, that they wrote multiple drafts. So after the fifth or sixth draft, I was going crazy. And when they came to me and 3 months later and said, "Would you like to write another one?" I said, no, please. I want to do it again. If I'd known that it wasn't that I was failing, as this Gene had a particular perception or conception of what he wanted that was difficult to attain, I might have actually accepted a second job on the show. I don't remember if I answered the question or not.
You did, thank you.
So thank you so much for coming. In the movie The Voyage Home, which I just love so much, you had some famous lines there when you were looking for the nuclear power. And
Yeah, Walter, do you remember what lines those were?
and wondering if you would be so kind and to say that again in only the way that you could say when you were looking for the nuclear vessels, if you remember that.
Would someone please point me in the direction of where the Nuclear whistles are, please.
Yay. Thank you.
I used to think that the carving on my tombstone was going to say, Walter Koenig, he screamed a lot, you know, as I did in many of the episodes of Star Trek series. But now I know that it's going to be nuclear whistles. And he went to a place where there were nuclear whistles.
Mr. Koenig.
Koenig. Koenig. It's like the Koenig.
Koenig.
Koenig, yeah.
Izveniti. Loved you as Chekhov, but I also really loved you on
B5.
B5. Yeah, and it was just so different. Could you comment on how you felt about that? And
I loved being on Babylon 5. I had from every aspect, from every point of view, it was a very positive experience. You have to understand that when we were doing Star Trek in the 60s, there was a whole different sense of what a company of actors or a group of actors in a show, how they were presented and how they were dealt with. Back in the 60s, we really had a class system. There were the leads and what were sometimes called the bit parts. Nothing can be more insulting than to be told that you have a bit part on a show. But that was actually, there was a delineation that was pretty specific along those lines. And that wasn't just for Star Trek, that was the way it was. That was the way it was back in the 60s. And in fact, if you recall, our credits came at the end of the show, whereas Bill Leonard's and DeForest came at the beginning of the show. So the definition was very, very distinct. And we accepted it. We didn't know any better. But when I came on to Babylon 5, things had changed. It was almost 30 years. It was 30 years later. Wow. I had also the experience of having been on Star Trek, and there's a certain aura, a certain. It's a great word that I can't think of. That goes with having been on a successful show, and people just automatically respect you more. But beyond that, there was a more wonderful sense of democracy among the cast. Everybody was equal. Everybody was treated that way. There was no sense that you were a lesser character. So that in itself was really a terrific feeling. Everybody accepted me immediately. I became good friends with several of the folks from the cast, and enjoyed it just from that point of view. I'm going to jump around here and remind me where I was at, because there's a good chance that I won't remember. But when we did Star Trek 3, and they gave me this pink outfit with the white collar, and said it was the young Pushkin. Pushkin was a Russian poet, and I hated it. I just absolutely hated it. But I shot the first day's sequences, and next day we went to dailies, and after dailies, Leonard came up to me, he was the director, and said, "We're getting rid of that costume. The executives didn't like it." And I said, "Thank God." He says, "You didn't like it?" And I said, "No, I hated it." He says, "Well, why didn't you say something?" I didn't say things because I didn't think I could. I didn't think they would listen. You know, that was my conditioning from back in the 60s. And I realized, wait a second, there's a different attitude now. There's a different point of view. And it made me feel much more that I was contributing to the show, that I wasn't a piece of movable furniture. So what I had been talking about was how we were all treated on Babylon 5. And there was this great sense of camaraderie, of friendship. Everybody, was the equal of everybody else. And Jerry Doyle and what's his name? Come on, Bruce Boxleitner and Christian and everybody. We were all on the same level, and it was a great feeling. It was just so wonderful to feel this was a family. This was a family affair, as opposed to Star Trek, which was always distant cousins, at best. So, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay.
Walter, real quick, just kind of going off of that, is there anybody from the cast of Star Trek that you feel like you had a more special relationship over everybody else? Is there someone that you connected with really, really well?
I loved DeForest. DeForest Kelly was a terrific guy. He was very warm, very considerate. He was the bridge between Leonard and Bill and the rest of us. He fit in perfectly with Leonard and Bill and was part of the triumvirate. But he also fit in with us. There was no sense of I can't think another word I can't think of. But in any case, he was as much a part of our group as he was of Bill and Leonard. So talk, joke, laugh. He told me that jokes about things that Leonard and he pulled on Bill, which I'm not going to repeat. But but let me just put it this way: it endeared him to us even more. And Dee held a very special place with the fans. He'd go to the conventions, and they just adored him. He was a terrific guy. He told me one great story. Paramount at that time owned Madison Square Garden and the New York facility where they played New York Knicks play basketball and all sorts, and boxing was very big. And they had a doctor's night when Julius Erving, who was a famous pro basketball player, was retiring. And every city that he played in that year, or that season, held some kind of a ceremony for Julius Erving. And he was called Doctor. He was called the Doctor. And so they had one in Madison Square Garden. And Paramount invited several, Dr. Ruth, who's still alive, I didn't know that. Dr. Ruth was there, and Dr. Salk, the Salk vaccine, and Dr. McCoy. They invited Dr. McCoy. And so Dr. Ruth came out, and Dr. Salk, and a couple of other doctors, and then they introduced Dr. McCoy, and the place went crazy. It was like a 7 or 8 minute just screaming, applauding audience. It was, and for him to tell me the story, I mean, it wasn't easy for him to get this out because he's not, he's not into self-promotion. He wasn't, he was not that kind of personality. But it was truly an extraordinary experience. I wish I could have been there because Star Trek was still very vital and very much a part of the current culture at the time. And McCoy was so endeared and loved. So it was, he did tell me, though, that Dr. Ruth had absolutely no idea who he was. So she was saying, who's this man? Who's this man who's here? What does he do? What does he do? And Irving said, because by that time they were all collected there, and he said, well, he's on Star Trek. He was one of a doctor on Star Trek? But what is Star Trek? So yeah, Dee was an exceptional person.
That's lovely to hear. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Walter.
Hi.
Thank you so much again for being here tonight. I was just curious, what was one of your favorite memories from the original series, whether it was a scene or anything else, or even from the original series movies?
You mean the time, beside the time that, and I do this first, when Hatner's hairpiece fell off? Because, no, that's cruel. That's not, and if there's one person I don't want to feel angry about, it's, what's his name? A specific instance, not that I can think of offhand. It was good. It was always good. I was always happy to work. I was always happy to go there. It was not always, fulfilling aesthetically. I mean, you can, they have blue buttons that I pushed when I was feeling depressed, and purple when I was in a rage, and yellow when I was feeling cowardly. But other than that, I didn't have a lot of motivation, you know what I mean? But no, it was fun. I enjoyed it, sometimes more than others. There's sometimes when I really yearned to do more than I was given the opportunity to do. But and as I indicated earlier, I'm extraordinarily grateful for the opportunity it gave me. I was approached about 6 months ago to republish my autobiography with an addendum covering the last 21 years, 1997, 78 to 2019. And so it covers the time in between. Now, what the hell was I just going to say? What were we talking about? Yeah. Well, sorry, guys. What the hell was I going to say? Don't remember. But I jog. I had something to say. I don't know what it is. Anyway, let's go on to another.
You were mentioning this book. Is the book out now?
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, okay. My autobiography, it's called Warp Factors, A Neurotic's Guide to the Universe, and was published in 1997. I wanted to call the new edition, because it has the old book plus the 70-odd pages that I've written since then. I wanted to call it Beaming Up and Getting Off, but
I like that title.
should I fight for it?
Yeah.
My wife was in the audience once when I told people that, and two young ladies were sitting in front of her and said, "Oh, he's turning into a perv in his old age." Next question.
All right.
Another?
Yes, I am a huge original series fan, but also wanted to ask a Babylon 5 question, because in that you were a steely, cold-hearted villain, and just wanted to ask if you enjoyed playing the bad guy and how that felt.
How did it help?
How did it feel
Oh, how did it feel?
to be the bad guy?
Well, the definition of actor is not that you play one role for 40 years, I think John Wilkes Booth's brother did that. He played one of the Shakespeare plays, and he toured the world playing, I think, Richard III or something. But that's not really our calling. Our calling is to explore ourselves and be able to express that in a diversity of roles. So I always knew that there was more to me than there was just playing Chekhov, and I so welcomed that opportunity on Babylon 5. And for me to say that he was a villain is to editorialize. And my job as an actor is to embrace that character, find what it is in me that I can contribute to the lines that'll make the character truthful. They'll make it honest, make the audience believe the reality of that character. So I don't label it. I don't label the character as being villain. I see there are things obviously that I would never do. But for the purposes of playing that character, I had to embrace who he was. And I was able to justify his behavior on the positive things, that he was very loyal to his people, that he was part of a minority that was being, that prejudices were held against, and that he was determined to make sure his people were secure and safe and a part of the society. So I came close to playing Charles Manson, Yeah, laugh you will. I really looked forward to that opportunity because I knew that I would have to really work at finding how to make that character believable for me, you know, and where I would have to search in me to find the qualities that were so onerous and odious, to the rest of the world. Because we have all those things, you know. Some of us are better at socializing and better at living in a civilized manner and more humanistic. But we wouldn't survive as a species unless we could be antagonistic, unless we could be hostile, unless we could fight for our existence. And so that's built into to our DNA. It's just a matter of exploring and looking for it and finding it. And obviously it didn't work out. I didn't get to play him. But yeah, as an actor, I don't think you can go in thinking in terms of the negative. You've got to go in thinking, how do they get that way? How do you justify that kind of behavior? What deep, dark places in you that you have to examine and be able to express that'll make it possible for you to be believed.
Thank you.
Yeah, that doesn't require applause.
Hello, Walter. Thank you for coming to Minnesota and braving the cold. I have seen you in the original Star Trek. I've seen you in Starfleet Academy, which I played as a kid. I've also seen you in Star Trek Renegades. I've only seen the first episode, but there's also only been 2. The main thing I loved you in is Star Trek of Gods and Men, how you played Kittredge. And then also, so my question is, how did you like playing Kittredge? And also, how did you like seeing Nichelle Nichols after the long time that you've been working with her?
Jesus. Who's Who was Kittredge?
Yeah, let's be honest. Who's Kittredge?
Star Trek of Gods and Men. He was Captain Pavel Chekhov, but when they went back in time and messed up reality, he was Kittredge. He was a relatively evil person who was trying to kill Captain John Harriman.
Oh, yeah.
I had to look it up in IMDb, don't worry.
There you go again. I mean, there was great motivation and justification for his behavior. They had killed his wife and child. This is the one you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
That's the one where I had the outrageous wig, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So I had no problem with, recreate or igniting that kind of emotion against the people who were responsible for the death of my family. So, and that's in us. We just need to explore it, and that's what actors do. They explore who they are, and they can spend a lifetime doing that. The reason why I did all those other incarnations of Chekhov, the one for the television episode and the 2 Renegades ones, and the one you were referring to, is because I was still trying to dimensionalize him. You know, I felt that I played a 2-dimensional character on the series, and to some extent in the films as well. And I knew there was more to him than that. And I wanted to feel that I had created something that was tangible, that was a living being, not simply an expository mechanism to help promote the story, but a real character that has an investment in what's going on, and that the public the viewing audience has an investment in him because they identify this as a human being. So that's the reason why I did all these other things. I was still trying to make him a whole being, and I had fun doing it. The television thing was really put on, was produced by amateurs, by people who just had a fondness for Star Trek, and they did okay. They did okay. I don't think it was anything to feel embarrassed about, but it was certainly wasn't going to make me a rich man or bring me fame. I did it because I just wanted to make sure I got as much out of playing that character as I could. And the other part, how was it seeing Nichelle?
Yeah.
I love Nichelle. I love Nichelle. She's, we all know what's happened. We don't have to dwell up on that. But she was the first one to accept me on the series. She was always charming and delightful and a good friend, a loyal friend. And, she has a situation now that she can't help. But she's still out there. She's a trooper. She is, if you've talked to her, she's very affable and sweet and kind. And I add, only because it was brought up, there were, and I'm glad you asked that question, if for no other reason than this. There had been rumors out there that her son was mistreating her, and it got into People magazine. And I know the person responsible, and I believe that she believed that what had been told to her was true, and it was not true. Her son Kyle is an extremely kind, protective, loyal son, and don't believe, if you've heard bad things, don't believe them. They're simply not true. I know the parties who were responsible for that, and that person is going to jail. So if you see them, I hope you have only the nicest and most pleasant greetings for them both, because they're delightful, lovely people. I love them.
Thank you, sir.
Hello. Oh, jeez. I don't know. Hello, Walter.
Hello.
So this is a really good question for myself to say.
You're a ventriloquist?
No. I wish I was.
Did I hear a dog barking somewhere? Okay, that wasn't you.
No, it wasn't.
Okay.
So what had to be your most favorite, interesting creature or planet from the original series of Star Trek?
Oh, now you're getting personal. I didn't develop any strong affection for a plant or...
No, planet. Like the planet from, which planet from the original
Oh, which
series of
planet? That's a whole different thing.
Your
Oh,
travel, not planet.
totally different. Totally,
Sorry.
I have absolutely no remembrance of anything that gave me any stimulation from any of the planets that in other words, none of the planets turned me on. If that's what you're asking.
I would say I'm curious to hearing both answers.
So maybe go on to the next question.
Thank you.
Hi, if it makes you feel
Thank you.
better, any wildlife documentary on Siberia would show that Minnesota has all the same wildlife. So it's like being in Siberia here.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, no wonder it seemed familiar.
And just a comment, your scripts for the animated series and Land of the Lost were good, regardless of how many drafts they went through.
Well, The Land of the Lost is an interesting story because I never touch on that because it's infrequently brought up. But evidently, it was far more successful than I knew because they brought back the character that I created, and he was in subsequent episodes. After I wrote it, that was it for me. I just went on for the rest of my life. I must say, I really mustn't say, but I'm going to say it anyway. I don't think it was very well acted. I had fun writing it. I just didn't think the quality of the acting, and that included everybody. I don't think they were very good. But it was years later that I'd heard that they reintroduced the character that I created, and that the show was evidently one of the ones that fans like most. So that's nice to hear.
Well, actually, I think Leonard Nimoy played him in the Will Ferrell movie also.
Leonard Nimoy did one?
Well, he played Enoch in the Will Ferrell Land of the Lost. I believe he did the voice.
No. Oh.
In the Will Ferrell version of
The
Land
Will
of the
Ferrell version.
Yeah, they made a parody.
Is Will Ferrell the lead actor?
Yeah,
Oh.
but Enoch was played by Leonard Nimoy.
Really?
Well, the voice acting, I think. I'm not 100%. I didn't anticipate bringing that up, but I think he did the voice.
Well, maybe. I don't know. I don't see why he would. I mean, geez, he was going great guns during that whole period. He had lots and lots of important work to do. Somebody else?
Yeah.
Well, hello, Walter. It's an honor and pleasure to meet you. And I grew up watching the original series and the animated series especially, and also the movies. On that note, there was a story going around that you had your own theory on how Khan knew about you in Star Trek II.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true?
This is where I push the automatic button in my head and say, of course I was in the original series. Chekhov was on the third deck behind the boiler room and was so ill with a condition called Malapropsky's malady that he'd been ensconced in the bathroom for hours and hours while poor Mr. Khan, his genetically engineered kidney is about to explode, pounding pitifully on the bathroom door, begging to be let in, until finally the door opened. Chekhov stepped out, Khan grabbed him and said, "Your face, I will never forget."
On a related note, how did it feel when he gripped you and put you up in the air? When he gripped you and put you up in the air for that bit?
Yeah, that was the hoist. It was covered my crotch area, and it wasn't all that comfortable. Contrary to rumors you might have heard, it was not pleasant. Yeah, but it was fun. It was fun working with Ricardo. He was a delightful man, real gentleman. We became, soundstage friends. We weren't friends off stage. But I had written a screenplay that I thought he would be terrific in, playing the lead. It was about a Native American who comes off the reservation, looked for the body of his son. And I gave it to him to read. And he read it, and he called me and said, "Walter," he says, "I love your story. It's so wonderful." And I said, thank you, Ricardo." He says, "But does he have to wear old clothes?" A tuxedo would not do for this character, So that's pretty much where it ended. But yeah, he was a charming man, and it's nice to be able to talk about somebody only in superlatives. He was really. I didn't see a bad moment from him. In fact, when the first day of shooting, I remember that we had a scene, and he was a little bigger than life, but it was very effective. When he played the villain, he played. And Nick Meyer had called us all into the dressing room, or whatever the room was, and he all the actors, myself and Ricardo, and he said, "Ricardo, could you bring it down a little bit? It's just a little broad." And I thought, "Oh my God, what's going to happen now?" I was thinking of another actor on a show, obviously. And he says, "I see what you mean." And that was all. This is from a movie star. This is a guy who had done leads in motion pictures. And Nick was a relatively young man, and this was television. And he had total respect for the director. And it was a delight to work with. It's a good story.
Thank you very much.
Hello, Mr. Koenig. Thank
Hi.
you for being here. Hi. I also have a Bab 5 question for you. I think we can all agree that your Bester character was one that we love to hate, and that the idea of the PsyCorp was such a very interesting idea in that show. And I was just wondering if there was ever any talk of like some kind of a PsyCorp spin-off in any kind of a show or a movie.
It's just an interesting question. And as a matter of fact, Joe called me, and Joe Straczynski. Incidentally, right after I tell the story, I've got to tell you one other thing about Joe. And asked me, are you up to doing a film about the PsyCorp, the wars? We're talking with Warner's about a feature film that would involve the PsyCorp and the telepath wars. And I said, yeah, hell yes, I'd love to do that. Well, that didn't happen, but when he put that other series on the air, which was called, come on, somebody knows.
Crusade.
What?
Was it Crusade?
Yeah, that one. I got a script in the mail. It was for episode 13, and it was a story that very heavily involved Bester, to the point where it was patently obvious that he was meant to return after this particular episode. The unfortunate part is that they canceled the show after episode 12. So I had the lines all memorized. They actually paid me for it, but we never shot it, which was too bad because it would have been great fun. Would have been great fun to do. But hey, that's showbiz. That's what happens, you know.
Thank you.
We still have time?
Yeah, we got time for this one right here.
Walter.
Whoa.
Yes, pay
You might need to
attention.
sit down, Walter.
1967, Davy Jones is the most popular music star on Earth, and they hire you in Star Trek to be the heartthrob of the show.
That in itself is hysterical, but go ahead.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that?
What are my thoughts on that? Thank God for Davy Jones. It's funny because I had been doing the show about a year, and I was at dinner with a bunch of actor friends in LA, and they currently were not employed, and I was on Star Trek, which already leans the conversation in a certain direction. But this young woman came up to me and said, "Oh my God, it's you." I said, "Well, yeah, I suppose so." I looked at my fellow actors, they're eating away and kind of grumbling to themselves. I could just imagine what they were thinking. And she said, "My girlfriend doesn't believe it's you." I said, Could you come over and introduce yourself, please? I said, "Well, okay." And I started to get out of the chair, and she said, "Oh, and can you sing 'Hey, Hey, We're the Monkeys'?" Yeah, so I finally met him. I met the other monkeys first, and a couple of them I really liked. It seemed like very nice gentlemen. And then I met Davy Jones. I'd say now it's about 7 or 8 years ago. And I was visiting a convention. I wasn't actually a guest there. It was in LA. And I went up and introduced myself. He knew nothing about me. And of course, I knew so much about him. But that was okay. He was very, very sweet and very, very friendly. And he had a full head of hair, which I envied. And on the other hand, he was at least 2 to 3 inches shorter than I was. So that's how we evened up things, you know. But he was a delightful fellow, and his passing is far too premature.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And Walter, before we go, I just want to know, behind the camera, Walter, the Walter at home, what are you passionate about in life? Besides acting, going on screen, things like that, what are you passionate about in life right now?
I mean, I can't talk about sex.
There you have it.
No, there's a reason why you asked that question. He's absolutely right. What am I passionate about? I'm passionate about changing our administration. That has got to happen. It has got to happen. That more than anything stirs me up. And you know, I've been fairly active in helping promote that change. Beyond that, I just want to make sure that how many years I have left, and I'm 83, folks. How many years I have left that they are lived with a desire to continue to enrich my life. That I'm not just waking up and saying, what am I going to do today? I want to continue to be as active and as I can. You know, relating to people, relating to work. My book is coming out again. I've conceived what I think is a long-form television series, 5-episode television series that I've started to work on. I don't know if I'll ever finish it because I don't know if I'll be here. But it's exciting to work on something, to develop the characters and their relationships and how the plot evolves. I've been approached about a very interesting idea for a podcast, which is different than I think most of what's out there. I'm not prepared to discuss it in detail, but it's something that will get me up in the morning and keep my brain working and keep me moving. And there was a great old Negro League baseball pitcher named Satchel Paige, and he said, "Don't look back; something might be gaining on you," and that's sort of my philosophy at this point. You know, the past is the past. You got to keep looking forward and make sure that you're living your life to the best that you can. So that's pretty much where my passions are these days.